You got to love technology. I played the Sam Ellinger, we're back. It's not because of Georgia, though. I promise you. We play it every time we come out of a commercial break, Graham. I just got to let you know that. But, my man, what's happening? How have you been? It's been a long time.
Good, man. Yeah. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, look, we've been going around the SEC, and we want to go to Athens. Okay, we've been to Arkansas. We've been to Bama. We've been to South Carolina. Now we're going back down to Athens. Graham, I got to ask you, the number one question that everybody wants to know, when is Arch Manning committing to the Georgia Bulldogs?
Man, that is a good question. There was some buzz a month or two ago that we wouldn't see him until, probably after his senior season. He did an interview, one of the few interviews he's ever done, talking about, hey, I want to see how Sark does in year two, and I want to see what, these teams do here and there. And then he comes off this Texas visit, and there's a little bit of whispers that, hey, maybe we'll see something before the end of the summer. I think if you're a Georgia fan and it turns out he's committing before the end of the summer, that's good news, just because I think there's far less question marks around Kirby Smart's program right now than there is Steve Sarkisian's. Man, I still think that Georgia has the lead here, but it's tough. No official visit ever goes bad. And, of course, he was in Austin last weekend. Right. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement there from Texas folks, as there should be. But Georgia has been kind of the most consistent force throughout this recruitment. I think if UGA didn't chase Caleb Williams in the transfer portal after the national title game, he's probably committed to UGA at this point now. So I think if you're a Georgia fan, you can still feel good. But it's tough, man. There's not much information coming out of that camp. Obviously, they've kept things pretty tight-lipped down there. So anyone that says they know everything that's going on there or even, has an idea of when exactly he's going to commit, I think is maybe exaggerating the truth a little bit.
I agree with that, Graham. And we live here. We saw him, I think, what was it, last week at the LSU 7-on-7 camp. And, the buzz was, everybody was talking about him and that. And it was just like, man, the kid doesn't even know where he's going yet. Why do you know?
Exactly.
Are you, Graham, though, and look, I want to get to on the field with Georgia because Arch Manning's not playing next year, so it doesn't really – it's a little irrelevant, but it is Arch Manning. Are you a little surprised, though? Because, look, Kirby has been what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say gotten a lot of heat for the offense and what the offense has done in Georgia, but he has a little bit, right? Very pro-style, very conservative. But then all of a sudden you win a national title. Arch Manning's trending to Georgia. Are you surprised, though, that Georgia is what some people believe the top of that leaderboard for him? And is it maybe Todd Monken that is swaying this with the pro style and the pro style things that they do at Georgia?
Yeah, for sure. I think the greatest testament to Todd Monken is what he did with Stetson Bennett last year.
Agreed.
Formationally, they did a ton of things to disguise tendencies and really confuse defenses and defensive coordinators. So I think he deserves a ton of credit going back to what he did at Oklahoma State and at the Tampa Bay Bucks with Jameis Winston. And, his track record speaks for itself. I think the name that probably a lot of people outside of UGA circles don't know very well that has been really key in this recruitment is Buster Faulkner. And he was down at Southern Miss once upon a time. He was the OC there. Has a relationship, he's a South Mississippi, South Louisiana guy. And so he has a relationship with the Mannings that goes back, I think, a lot further than a lot of folks realize. Matt Luke as well. Obviously, there's the Ole Miss tie with Archie and Eli and Cooper as well, who went to school there. He's not obviously on the staff at UGA anymore, but I think he's still doing a little work for Georgia behind the scenes on this deal. So the thing I think for Georgia is you hear a lot about Arch having a good relationship with Steve Sarkisian, and I have no reason to believe that's not true. But I think when you look at what's going on with the staff in Athens, there's a few strong relationships there. I don't think it totally hinges on one guy, but some folks may, there's been buzz for a while that we'll see an extension for Todd Monken before this season starts. And I think if that happens, that's maybe another good indicator that he's found the quarterback that he wants to coach for the next few years, and that's enough to keep him in college instead of going back to the NFL ranks.
It would be huge, and I'm assuming Todd is involved in that all the way. And look, There's not a lot of offensive coordinators in college that have that NFL experience like Todd Monken does. So I think it would be very interesting. One thing, though, before we get on the field for this upcoming season with Georgia, I want to talk to you about Cortez Hankton. Obviously, new LSU wide receivers coach. What can you – I mean, we look – Louisiana people know a lot about Cortez. You can't be from the state of Louisiana, recruit the way that he does, win a national title elsewhere, and you don't keep up with him. But we didn't follow the day-to-day at Georgia. You know, we saw the big games, Jermaine Burton – we saw all of that, but what can you tell LSU fans, though, on the field about Cortez Hankton and what they should expect?
I think the last year at Georgia got kind of interesting because you have to remember Todd Monken was a wide receivers coach before he ever became an offensive coordinator. And so I think he had a way that he wanted things done. I'm not sure that him and Hankton always saw eye to eye. That doesn't necessarily mean one's right, one's wrong, but I think for Georgia fans, there were times where they felt like the recruiting was good and they would get a guy on campus and they didn't see him maybe develop as a route runner the way that they had hoped. You saw a lot of Georgia wide receivers go and work with Terrence Edwards in the offseason in Atlanta,
right.
Former UGA receiver who runs his own receiver kind of academy there. I think if I was an LSU fan, that might be my major concern is just – what happens development-wise. But if you look at that wide receiver core last year from game one versus Clemson to all the way through, you had guys that no one ever thought was going to be on the field making significant contributions. Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell was a first-year kid on campus. And so I think that is a credit to the depth that he was able to assemble in Athens. You watched kind of throughout the year like the downfield blocking and the blocking on the perimeter by the receivers improved greatly. So I think maybe the plus for him, if I was kind of grading him, is from week 1 to week 15, he did a lot to improve that group. But maybe the question would be why weren't some of those things happening from the start of the season, right?
That is very interesting. And look, he obviously didn't have his number one receiver that was on the field a lot.
Or two, yeah. I mean, Burton
right.
was never healthy. Kyrus Jackson was never healthy. The top, really the starting guys that you thought were going to be the first rotation, none of them were ever fully healthy last year. So,
I mean, there wasn't really a time that Jermaine Burton and George Pickens ever really saw time together, right? I mean, I don't ever remember just because of injury.
Until the Natty, yeah, really. And, I mean, Pickens was on a snap restriction. I think he had 12 routes running that entire game. But he made them count, right? But
you're right. He did. He did. Hey, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you make them count, you make them count. Graham Coffey's our guest. We'll let you know where you can catch all of his stuff, and you follow him on Twitter and all that great stuff as well. Graham, let's get on the field. Obviously, the best defense that we've seen in a long time was in Athens a season ago. You're replacing a lot. You're replacing the big mountain in the middle. You're replacing Davis at linebacker. But, man, Kirby has recruited very well on the defensive side of the ball. What should we expect, though, from Kirby? What is this defense going to just reload, or is there going to be some rebuilding? We've seen him obviously do it with Nick in Alabama, but has he built this team to reload on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think talent-wise they reload. I mean, that front seven last year was so special that it allowed them to
right.
do some things schematically that really, aren't the norm for a Kirby Smart defense or for any college football defense for that matter. And that really allowed them to protect the secondary. Ringo obviously had the big pick six to end the season, but he struggled at times. The reality, though, was just nobody ever really had to worry about him that much because no quarterback was getting enough time for somebody to get behind him. So I think that's the question for Georgia more is you're probably going to see less 5-6 man rushes and more measures taken to kind of keep things steady on the back end, probably more kind of cover 2, cover 3 concepts on the back end. And so who steps up on the front side to be able to really rush the passer and kind of create pressure to protect those young guys in the secondary. Chris Smith comes back at strong safety, but lots of questions besides him and Ringo. You don't really know who the other safety is going to be, who's going to play slot corner, who's going to play that other boundary corner spot. So I think that's the big question. Everyone looks at where the guys were drafted from and assumes the drop off comes in the front seven, but looking at what's been recruited there and kind of some of the rotation guys from last season, I don't think you have as many issues there. Like Georgia's not going to get gashed on the ground. That's not happening. But like you look at that Mississippi State game on the schedule, right? Like that one I think probably scares you a little bit if you're a Georgia fan. That schedule for Georgia lines up so favorably right now. I don't know who's really going to like make them strain from a passing attack standpoint until you get to maybe November or December. So that's sort of the question. Is I don't know that we'll know anything of substance even from that Oregon game with what they have coming back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously, you're playing Oregon. You're playing your former DC in his first ever game. I think that's all. College football gives us that stuff. And look, let's see. Does your DC leaving? How do you adjust? I mean, he knows them really well. He knows you better than you know his team, right? But look, Bo Nix, Bo Nix, and so we'll see how that goes. Graham Coffey joining us. A couple more, Graham. Look, obviously, I got to go to the mailman. And talk about Stetson Bennett. Now, I've been a defender of the mailman, okay? Look, there's a difference, in my opinion, in being a really good college quarterback and being an NFL prospect. And I just think that Stetson is just a really damn good college quarterback. He makes right decisions. He gets out of the pocket. He runs when he needs to. He gets down. He stays upright. But he's got a lot of talent behind him. Am I supposed to believe what I hear from some that he has a very short leash in this offense after coming off a national title run?
I think that depends on how fall camp goes and how Carson Beck looks. Carson Beck looked really good in the spring game. He did. And he, you could see some very like substantial improvement from that time a year ago from spring 2020 to to 2022, like very big difference. He looks like he's getting through progression, seeing the field. He has more of an arm than Stetson does. I don't think anybody would argue that, but Stetson kind of just has that like thing, right? Where when a game gets sort of stressful and you really need a clean possession and to go score a touchdown, he always seems to do it. And that's something that you can't really measure in fall camp. So I wouldn't say he has a short leash by any means. I think that offensive line is going to probably be the strongest unit on the team. That tight end room is insane with Gilbert, Bowers, Darnell Washington. There's a ton of receiving talent. The running backs are good. So I think Stetson has been mislabeled at times as like a game manager. He's not. Like, honestly, I think there's times where Georgia would like for him to dial it back because he'll kind of just like have a couple YOLO plays a half and
SEC championship game, right?
Yeah. Or I mean, even against Michigan, you're up like 3 touchdowns in the second half, and he's throwing across his body into triple coverage. Yeah, and it's like, whoa, And I think sometimes he presses and tries to make those plays, and if he does that, then I could see him ending up being replaced at some point. But if he plays point guard, he'll be fine. And I think that's really all he needs to do for Georgia to get back to where they want to be in December and January, probably.
I did want to ask you about Arik Gilbert very quickly before we get to these fan questions. How's his progression going? Obviously, people at LSU know a lot about Arik Gilbert, some of the things that happened off the field, but I don't want to go into that. Let's let the man progress. How's his offseason going so far?
Really well, by all accounts. I think the best thing that ever happened to him was just, him and his family and Georgia's staff making that decision to say, we're not going to worry about you playing football in 2021. We're going to worry about you, going to school and just having good, healthy life habits, right? And
right.
It seems like all of that is carried over. I mean, that spring game performance that he put out was really like tantalizing, I think, for all Georgia fans and for just football fans that want to see a unique talent. You think about the fact that apparently at the start of spring practice, he was almost 300 pounds. And so he's out there on G-Day at 280, catching a couple touchdown passes and beasting folks over the middle. And it's like, well, what's going to happen with, another 6 months of conditioning and all of that good stuff between that day and, between him being 300 pounds and the start of the season. So I think everyone's excited about him. I do think, like, from all that I've heard, you can count on him playing football for Georgia this year. I'd be very surprised if he's not. I don't know that Georgia really has to, like, force him into being a 14 target a game kind of guy right off the bat, right? I think they can kind of let him ease into the process and probably still be winning games comfortably. But it's one of those things where when it comes to facing an Alabama or, you know, a potential playoff scenario or SEC championship game scenario, it's like he's the mismatch, right? And so
He is.
yeah. And so, I mean, you give him a full off season and then a full kind of season of weekly practices to get into prime conditioning. It could be the X factor for them come the end of the season.
Now, I know you mentioned McIntosh, but LGZ says, hashtag Ask Graham, what are your expectations for McIntosh this year?
I think he's the number one back for sure. And I don't think that's anything to do with Kendall Milton's kind of injury issues in the past. What he does as a running back, I think I was someone that was critical of him, or maybe not just him, but some of the situations that he was used in. His first couple years, you would see him in the game sometimes on 3rd and short, and I just was like, he's not that guy. And then all of a sudden, come November of last year, it's 3rd and short, he's getting hit 2 yards short of the sticks, and he's moving piles, right? And it's like, well, all of a sudden you kind of couple that power with the speed and agility that we already knew was there, and you've got something special. I think the biggest thing about him is that he runs routes like a slot receiver. He does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like when he's in the game, he's hardly ever, you know, in there to pass block. Like if he's in the game on a passing down, 9 times out of 10, he's going out for a pass. And so you look at what Georgia did with James Cook last year, and you feel like they can do some of those things with McIntosh and probably a little bit more in terms of working over the middle. Cook was more, you know, fly routes down the sidelines once every couple games, and that was something that hit for Georgia a few times. But I think he could have a really special season. Georgia's always going to rotate backs, but like between receiving yardage and rushing yardage, I'd honestly be surprised if he doesn't eclipse 1,000 yards next season.
Look, and if your offensive line is your best unit and you get him going, it could be dangerous. Sure. Graham Coffey was our guest. Graham, fantastic, man. I love bringing you on. You're always a wealth of knowledge. Tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff and everything that you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Dog Out West, and we just started a new website called dogcentral.com. Come check it out. We've got some great free articles, awesome forums, lots of great intel. It's myself and about a dozen other UGA content creators, so tons of content, and you can get 6 months for $33.18. Don't know if you can do better than that. So
it's a really good number, 6618, man. You gotta love that,
right? Totally.
You gotta love it. All right, man. Well, thank you so much, and we'll bring you on before the season starts. And I'm talking to you again soon.